Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Patrick Oliphant was a giant slayer. In addition to being a fearless stunt pilot executing dangerous maneuvers just to blow off a little steam, he bravely took on presidents, popes, and the American corporate class with his mighty pen. An Australian transplant, Oliphant was America's most renowned and feared political cartoonist for 5 decades. This amazing film is called A Savage Art, The Life and Cartoons of Pat Oliphant, and we're joined today by the director, Bill Banowsky. Bill, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I mentioned to you just before we got started that I grew up in Los Angeles area, and I grew up with Paul Conrad, who to my mind is one of the great cartoonists of all time. I mean, I always was aware of it. I'd see it in national magazines. I saw it a lot of different places. But boy, this gives me a whole nother level of appreciation for his work because in some ways it's even more cutting and sharp than Conrad's was. And the artwork is remarkable. So tell me a little bit about, I know this is kind of a personal, how you got into the story is a little bit of a sort of a family story, if you will. But what was it that in your getting to know a little bit about Pat that triggered you to want to start this project?
So I really did not know much about his work when I met Pat 10 years ago. My wife and I moved from Austin to Santa Fe, and I'm also from Southern California. I grew up in Southern California, but we were living in Austin for many years, moved to Santa Fe. In Santa Fe, there's a wonderful tradition on Christmas Eve in the neighborhood where we lived, where people would walk up and down the streets, and often it'd be snowy, and there would be parties at different houses. And we were invited with some friends of ours who we'd met just moving there to come walk the streets with them. And one of the first houses we went into was a block away from ours, and it was Pat and Susan Oliphant. And we walk in, and we turned to, it was full of people. Turned to the right, and sitting in the corner was this guy with white hair and a white puffy jacket and a red bandana, and it was David Byrne from the Talking Heads sitting in the Oliphant house. And then Terry Allen, this country western singer, and there's Australian ambassador. They just have it was amazing. It was like a salon of these interesting people, and we got to know them. My wife Susan and I, living a block away, we became fast friends, and we would spend a lot of time at their house. This was back when Pat was in better health than he is now. Now he is virtually blind and also just in very poor health. But when he was healthy, and even now, even today, he has his moments. His wit is so sharp. He
Yeah.
he is such a funny guy, and he's irreverent, not for the point of being irreverent. That is his ethic. And he was always clear about when he was cartooning and lambasting politicians, he never became friendly with the politicians. He would never, socialize with politicians because he didn't want to perhaps like them. He wanted to stay objective. And for 50 years, from LBJ to Trump, he was definitely nonpartisan in his approach. And his artwork was what really just kind of brought us in because all around his house and in his studio, it wasn't just his cartoons that were in display, but there's beautiful paintings and sculptures and lithography and things like that. It sets him apart, I think, from most political cartoonists. Kind of puts him in the class of Daumier and Goya, and will look at him when people understand the body of his artwork.
By the way, I'm glad you brought up Damier because, by the way, this film brings you into not only the life and cartoons of Pat Oliphant, but it also brings you into the kind of the history of cartooning and why it evolved into what we, especially political, socially critiquing kinds of art. That he was such a part of that tradition, but it gives you a sense of the importance of it, and it kind of reflects what I've been saying for a long time, not the first to say this, is that in many ways the origin story for comedy or stand-up comedy as we know it was the court jester was the person in the court of the king who was willing to tell the king the truth in a way that he would hear it. And I think cartooning, the way that
Mm.
Oliphant and these other political cartoonists have done over the many, many decades, is a form of that. It is a form of telling the king or the king's people that this is really what's happening. This is really what we need to be paying attention to and why. So, in me, that's to my take. Does that sound about right? Or
And it's so true now, I think more than any time in my lifetime, that this country is in need of satire and satirists who can hold the powerful to account. And that's
yeah,
what Pat did for 50 years, and he did it as well as anyone in this country. This guy who came from Australia and took Paul Conrad's job when Paul left to the LA Times in the mid 60s. The importance of satire when journalism is under attack in the way that it is. We started this film in 2019 during the last year of Trump's first administration. And it took a lot of years to finish for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's the first film I've ever made, so it doesn't come naturally to me. It was a real labor of love that I wanted to get right. And as it turned out, I started taking some, feeling less pressure as time went on in the second Trump administration because I realized the timing for this film is coming up.
yeah.
It has not missed its moment, and I feel like it's in its moment right now. I think that this is the perfect time for this t film to be seen by people, and hopefully people will show up and enjoy it.
I couldn't agree more. Satire and people who are willing to say the quiet part out loud is a tradition which, to my mind, the Brits were so good at. The British,
Mhm.
and there was sort of a golden era of going after the king or the queen without getting your head chopped off. I mean, going back to Gulliver's Travels, right? So many examples of why
Yeah.
that matters.
Well, and the Brits really more or less invented it. I mean, in the film, we do talk about how Ed Sorel does a great job of narrating the history of political cartoons, as does others in the film. But it started in the Reformation when, the Italians were making cartoons and vice versa. But it really and what he did in the 18th century. We do have that thread as sort of the base of what political cartooning has meant to political establishments and free democracies. And so we had this unique individual, Pat Oliphant, who has uh, been such a powerful person in his field, but it's also a field that hasn't really been portrayed in any real sense. I mean, that's in a documentary film. It's not. It hasn't been overdone.
Right,
I
right.
mean, there have been good political cartooning films. HBO did a film about her block
Yeah,
about 10
yeah,
years ago. A
yeah.
lot of attention given to political cartooning, and I think it's more important now, particularly and since the Herblock film 10 years ago, so much has happened under Trump. And you have people like Rob Rogers being fired at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette for making fun of Trump and others. You have the New York Times and stopping political cartooning entirely because they were afraid of being accused of anti-Semitism. Now, the fact is, and Michael Kavanaugh pointed this out to me, the New York Times hasn't been showing political cartoons in its main paper for many years, but it was in the international edition of the New York Times where this one cartoon making fun of Trump and Netanyahu was published, and they ended up being attacked for anti-Semitism because the cartoon had portrayed Netanyahu as a dog and Trump as a blind man following the dog with a leash. And it showed that the collar had a Star of David, and that's a no-no. Apparently, you're not supposed to do that. You can do the flag of Israel, but not the Star of David. And then Ed Sorel points out, well, the Star of David's on the flag of Israel,
Yeah,
and this is ridiculous. Then
yeah.
we go back and look at some of Pat's cartoons back in the last 20, 30 years, Israel and Gaza and so many of these other things that we're dealing with now, not limited by any sort of rules of engagement, if you will. I mean, it was a fair game. Everything was fair game to him. We've come into a little bit more of a period of careful on what we say, and that's just never what Pat was all about.
No. Well, that's a good opening here. I want to talk about Pat Oliphant and who he is as a person. We see it in the film. I think a little prickly, maybe a man who would listen. He certainly followed his own muse for basically, at least in what I see in the film. He didn't, as you said, he wasn't going to be making friends with presidents or leaders in political parties. How would you describe him? His bearing, if you will. How is he?
Well, I've known him for 10 years, including, several of those years where he was in much better physical condition than he is currently. And he's funny,
Mm-hmm.
he's biting.
Mm-hmm.
He is not afraid to say what's on his mind. He's always, and as a person, he's very much like we show him as a cartoonist, he's someone who just tells it like it is, who's very serious about his craft.
Yeah.
Every day for more than 50 years, he would create a piece of art and bring to light some important issue or an injustice that he was witnessing every day. And so it takes a certain level of integrity and who he is to be able to do that every day the way he did it. And so the way he is as a person is very much the way he is as a cartoonist. He's just is who he is. He is fun to be around,
Mm-hmm.
but his wit is biting and it
Yeah.
can step up and bite you too. And it's bitten me, bitten others
Yeah.
as well. He's also just one of the smartest human beings I've ever been around. He's just, and if you think about it, if you go back and look, and I've looked at thousands of his cartoons. He's published over 10,000
Yeah.
cartoons over his career.
Yeah.
I've looked at thousands of them. I still do just enjoy just going back and just taking a look at, oh, I just want to look at 1964. I did that last night. Just went through all of these things. And you see him evolve as a cartoonist and his style and so forth, as we point out in the movie. But it's just his intellect, just his ability to capture issues and ideas and to express thought. He's just a remarkably bright guy who had a tremendous gift to draw and to satire. His whole life has been that. He's done really nothing else. That has been it from the get-go. He's not kind of dabbled around in other things. He's never gotten tired of doing what he loved doing. That's just who he has been his life.
Yeah. Well, and we're all the better for it. I think is the ability to synthesize a lot of different political kind of perspectives and make it into something that is easily accessible and understandable from his point of view. It's brilliant, and the attention to detail in these cartoons is amazing. It's amazing. And I want to remind our listeners that we're speaking with the director of this wonderful documentary film called Savage Art: The Life and Cartoons of Pat Oliphant, Bill Banowsky. And there's certainly another level to this film where we get to meet his family, including his wife, Susan, who's also the producer of the film, as well as his son and daughter, which brings a whole nother level to our understanding of what makes Pat Oliphant tick. I love the little attention to the people who along the way influenced him. I'm a big Hunter Thompson fan. When I see Ralph Steadman, I think of great art. I think of Thompson and his perspective and how they're not that far apart in terms of their ability to find the soft underbelly of a particular point of view when it comes to politics. And that was Thompson's, to my mind, his gift was that ability to cut through it. And so just getting Terry Allen, by the way, I'm a big fan of Terry Allen. I actually saw him not that long ago in concert. So the people that you bring into the conversation about him are really very, just they add a lot to the flavor and the color of the film as well. The
And
reaction, the family. I mean, Susan was part of the as a producer on this film, but it's going to be opening. By the way, I just want to let people know it's opening in theaters September 5th. It's being released through Magnolia, which is a wonderful distributor. Congratulations on hooking up with them. And I expect you're going to get a lot of really wonderful responses in terms of the people who maybe not familiar with his work and people who are going to really it's just a really well done documentary film about someone who we know their work but we don't know them. In terms of that, what's been sort of the most satisfying part of this project for you? What
Mm.
has been the one thing that
Yeah.
you have taken away?
When I started this film in 2019, the original thought was just to do a short film. I owned I had, reason I moved to Santa Fe is I built a movie theater there, and I wanted to create some short films of interesting people in Santa Fe. I mean, there's no shortage of interesting people who live in Santa Fe. There's just a lot of really interesting people who live there. And so Pat was one of the first people who I did that with, and we sat down for an interview. It was clear from the beginning that there needed to be a bigger story told about Pat Oliphant. It shouldn't be done in a short film. It should be a feature film at a minimum. So I started this as we got into it, and it was a lot of fits and starts and stops. With in 2019 we were making a lot of progress. The Oliphant archives opened at the University of Virginia in the fall of 2019, which is where I am right now. We're going to be screening our film here this evening. We showed a 40-minute version of the film to a group of 150 people in fall of 2019 with the intention of finishing this film in 2020. And then, of course, COVID hit. The guy who was shooting this and editing it with me left, and it just took me a while to regroup. Ultimately, I brought in my longest friend in the world, who we grew up together in Los Angeles, Paul O'Brien, who's an editor in Hollywood, and he really pushed me to humanize Pat. Let's tell the story. And there's some kind of rough spots in there. He is a human, and some of the family stuff is difficult. And I was very concerned about how Susan Conway Oliphant would react to that. And fortunately, both she and Pat love the film, warts and all. What I like about this story is it's not just putting Pat Oliphant on a pedestal as this great artist, this great satirist, this great cartoonist. He's also a human, and as is in the case in many very successful people's lives, their family suffers as a result, and that was the case. His son, Grant Oliphant, ended up being a tremendous narrator of this film, and he really kind of carried the water so much in telling the story of his dad, which was really terrific working with all of the people that worked on this, whether it's Terry Allen or some of the great cartoonists, Ann Telnis and Adam Ziglas, who really contributed to the film, and they're just doing great, great cartoon work. I really love Adam Ziglas's work,
Yeah.
and
Ed Sorrell in here as well. So
Ed Sorrell is amazing,
yeah.
and what a legend he is. I think he has over 30 covers of his cartoon work on the New Yorker magazine. He's just one of a kind, and we interviewed him. This would have been in 20 or late 2019 in his apartment in Harlem when he was in his early 90s. And we opened this film in New York at the IFC Center on September 5th, and Ed has agreed to come down to the theater for a Q&A discussion afterwards in
Oh,
his mid
fantastic.
90s. And
Fantastic.
so that's something not to be missed.
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, congratulations on A Savage Art, the life and cartoons of Pat Oliphant. It is, as we've been talking about, a fulsome look at his work and at his life and his family. And congratulations. We just have not had time to talk about Punk the Penguin, who was a very, very important part of his career, his ability to insert his perspective into his cartoons. What a brilliant idea Punk was or is. And there's just a lot here. I want people to check this out again. A Savage Art, the life and cartoons of Pat Oliphant. It actually sounds like a Hunter Thompson when you put it that way, a savage art. Sounds like something Hunter would have come up with. And Bill Banowsky, thank you for your time and thank you for a wonderful documentary film.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.